Good morning, everyone. We will continue with our module two. So far, what we have seen. So, we initially had seen what advanced processor technology is all about. So, we saw what pipelining is, and also we also saw what are the different technologies. Like one was RISC, and the other one was CISC, and we made a comparison. And in the previous class, we saw about superscalar processors, VLIW, and vector processors. Okay, so these are the different the processor architectures that we've seen so far. So now the rest of the module we will be covering memory. Okay, specifically in today's class we will cover memory hierarchy. Okay, so I think you guys are already familiar with some aspects of it, so this will be more like a brush up for you guys. So you guys have had CO, right, like computer organization, in your earlier semesters. Have you studied about different memory technologies? Hello, have you studied memory technologies earlier, guys? Can you hear me? Are you guys able to hear me? Okay. Yeah, yeah, please respond, okay? Otherwise, I'll not know whether, I mean, whether you guys are able to hear me or not. All right, so let's go ahead. Let's see what we have. So today's class we will be seeing memory hierarchy, and the figure here shows the memory hierarchy. Okay, starting from level 0 all the way to the level higher levels. Okay, so we will actually have like a small discussion on this. Okay, so level 0, so we have registers. And registers, so what do you guys know about registers? So let's start. So Shubham or Swedel, you guys are not here. I'll give the privilege to Vaibhav. Vaibhav, can you point to someone? Varshita. Varshita, can you please unmute? Varshita. Vishal. Hey Vaibhav. So there's no lag or anything, right? Like, so if I speak, I think you guys can hear. I mean, fairly decently, right? There is no lag or any disturbance. Okay, so at least from my side, there is nothing wrong. Okay, Suhas. Hey Suhas. So can you? Okay. Good. Actually, yeah, that's very good. And I just wanted to, I just want to stress on that fact alone, right? Like registers are much faster than any other type of memory. But the question I want to ask is, why is that? Why are registers the fastest memory? If that is the case, then why can't we just have registers all along, right? Why do we need these hierarchy? Yeah, they're very fast. Okay, why can't we just have 1 GB of registers and get done with it? Good, very very good. Thank you. Thanks, Suhas. Okay, so that's the entire idea about this figure here. Okay, so you can see like a pyramid like structure. So registers being at the top, that is the fastest memory, okay, that is available to us. They, why are they fast? Because they are made of uh, like purely transistors, made of flip flops. Okay, it's completely CMOS and it's as fast as your AND gate or gate or anything, right? It's a sequential logic. That's what your registers are. It's just series of your D flip flops. Okay, if you recollect your digital logic, these are nothing but your D flip flops, which are again made of your gates. Okay, so which means your registers are memory elements that are as fast as your logic gates. So it's the fastest you can get. But the problem is every flip flop, right? So for 1 bit of flip flop, you need at least 4 to 8 gates. Okay, and for each gate you need like four or six transistors. So it means like for 1 bit you need so many transistors. Okay, like around like 15 to 20 transistors to store 1 bit of memory. And that's why it is very very expensive. Okay. On the other hand, when we go a little further, we have something called as cache. Okay. Now, cache is again the fastest memory outside of the CPU. Okay. So, registers are inside the CPU, like Suhas pointed out. Registers are within the CPU. Why? Because you can do that. It's just plain transistor CMOS technology. It's same as that of your all other components of your processor. Okay, it is inside your processor itself. But cache on the other hand, it's outside of your CPU. Okay, because it's of a different technology. And what technology is this? This is SRAM. Okay, cache is made of SRAMs. Hope you guys know what is a RAM, what is a ROM, and all these things, right? So RAMs are random access memory, and SRAMs are static random access memory. Okay, and static random access memory uh, is the fastest memory available to us in memory technology. I mean, of course, outside of your CPU. And these SRAMs are again made of completely transistors only, and they are organized in a different way. It's not like as in your flip flop. Okay, but here they are organized differently. With about like 4 to 6 transistors, you can actually have 1 bit stored. Okay, so again it's completely made of transistors. It can store 1 bit. It's much in this in terms of size or cost, it is better than register, but again it is a little bit slower. Okay, but it's again it's very expensive. So you have your cache memory as your first level. Okay, but actually, when we talk about memory, when we say memory technology, primary memory or main memory, we are going to refer to your DRAM, your main memory here. Okay, so when you say memory, primary memory, and all these things, we always refer to this level 2. So that's your primary memory, that's your DRAM. Okay, now DRAM is, I mean, D stands for dynamic, right? Dynamic RAM. So dynamic RAM is actually it's a what to say, improvement in the memory technology where you can reduce the cost greatly. You just need one transistor, but you need one capacitor. Okay, so instead of having like 4 to 6 transistors, so you will have like in one cell, okay, which is expensive. You can have the same one bit stored with just one transistor and one capacitor. Okay, but the problem here is that when you involve capacitor is an analog device, correct? So the moment you bring in capacitor, there are two things that are introduced. One is it becomes slow, okay, because capacitors can work only at their own speed. Okay, so you have to charge and then later discharge, right? So discharge will happen automatically. Okay, so whenever you charge, so you will have your capacitor, and then slowly the capacitance will come down. Okay, so now if you see, so the capacitor is the one that holds your logic bit 0 or logic bit 1. Okay, so now if it is here up to this, you will have like a threshold. Up to this you will call as 1, and then anything below this you will call it as 0. Okay, so this is like some gray area. So this is your logic 1 and this is your logic 0. Okay, now you have to keep pumping this capacitor. Okay, the capacitance needs to be pumped every time. You need to refresh. So that is why it's called as dynamic RAM. Dynamically you need to keep refreshing the RAM. Okay, it's a dynamic refresh, so that's why it is called as dynamic RAM. Okay, DRAM. Now because of this, it's actually a bit slower. Okay, because of involvement of your capacitor. Okay, so what's the downside? So one is, since you have capacitor, it becomes a little bit slower. And the other thing is, now you've just reduced the number of transistors, correct? So it becomes cheaper. Okay, so this is your DRAM. And then next we have your secondary storage. So this is where this is your hard disk. Okay, hard disk or your solid state devices. So when you want to buy a laptop, the first thing you see is what RAM is it, right? Even if you buy a phone, 4 GB RAM or 8 GB RAM, so that is this one. Okay, we really don't bother about cache because it's completely architectural and there is not much change available. But when you assemble different laptops or PCs or even mobile phones, you can actually have customized memory. Okay, so typically it's 4 GB, 8 GB, 16 GB, like that. Now the next thing what you see is the storage, right? So 1 TB, 2 TB, 4 TB. So you have these terabytes of memory these days. Okay, so that's your disk storage. And so nowadays we don't have disks. So we have solid state drives now, flash based or solid state drives. So these are much slower. Okay, so the solid state drives are also made of transistors, but these transistors are of a different technology. Okay, they are much slower, but they have a very good property of storing bits. Okay, previously we also used to have magnetic tapes. Examples of magnetic tapes are I don't know if you guys know about your VCRs and audio tapes. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that. I mean, maybe if you've seen it or not. It was in the 90s, right? So we used to have these magnetic tapes. Even in the old movies or old cartoons, if you see, they'll actually have film rolls. Correct? These rolls are all magnetic tapes. So anyway, so these magnetic tapes, and we also have floppy disk, right? Floppy disk is a magnetic disk, and this was again prevalent in 1990s. So we had floppy disk. So currently these are all out of use. We actually moved out of disk storage as well. So we have solid state drives that is ruling the market. Okay, and level 4 we have backup storage. These are additional storage we have. It could be again, it can be a solid state drive, magnetic tape, or it can be optical disk like your DVDs and things like that. Okay, so but primarily we will focus on these two. Okay, level 1 and level 2. Okay. Hey Vaibhav, hey, have you guys studied these memory technologies in computer organization? Okay, so you're familiar with all these things, right? Okay, okay, great. All right then. Thanks. So let's just move on then. Okay, so that's your memory hierarchy. So we saw the need and significance. What's the exact need? The need is we have a lot of applications now. So it's like applications are getting more and more demanding, and we need to keep it somewhere, right? So I mean, simply simple example is if you want to watch a movie. Okay, the movie itself will be about like 1 gigabyte or something. So you need to store it somewhere, and then it has to be buffered and it has to be played, streamed, right? So it's just about playing a movie, but then we are now talking about huge scientific applications like weather prediction or deep neural networks training and things like that. So even those scientific applications demand a lot of memory. Okay. So some of the parameters that we are interested in is access time. Okay, access time is the time for you to access one memory bit. Okay, and this time is with respect to your CPU. How much time it takes for CPU to access that memory bit. And as we saw, the registers are the fastest. So that's what we are saying, right? It is the fastest because it's there in the CPU itself. So within in one clock cycle, you can actually access a register. That's the fastest you can ever get. And as the levels increase, your access time will also increase. Okay. Next one is memory size. Again, because of cost, right? The closer you get to the processor, closer you are to CPU, the size also is going to become smaller because of the cost. Okay, so we don't have that technology to support a huge memory that is fast. Like for example, you cannot afford to have like 1 gigabyte of registers. Okay, we don't have that technology. And similarly, you don't even have technology to have like 1 GB of cache. Okay, cache will be typically maximum 512 MB or something. Okay, so that's all. That's how much you can actually get to because of the cost. So as the need for new memory and then the need for higher slower memory devices is because these slower devices can be affordable and they can be of huge size like in terabytes. Cost per byte is another factor. Okay, so that's I think we already saw this associated with the memory size also. And then transfer bandwidth. So one is access time. Access time is nothing but time to access one bit. And then afterwards it's also like how much you can transfer per second or something, right? So that's your bandwidth. So this again is it actually gets better when you move away from the processor. Okay, so for example, you can actually easily transfer like one movie, right? Like 1 gigabyte from here to your from disks to your main memory, but then it could not be the same. You cannot do at the same granularity to the cache. It cannot be. You cannot transfer 1 gigabyte to the cache because cache itself is few MB only. Okay, so that brings us to the unit of transfer. So what is the unit of transfer we are dealing with? In registers, it's just going to be bits. Okay, 32-bit register. So that's how much. That's how you will calculate. I mean, bits or in words. In caches, it's always blocks. How many blocks are there? In main memory, you always deal with pages, and in disk, you generally go with segments. Memory hierarchy terminology. So access time. So we're going to revisit the same aspects now. Okay. So access time. So if Ti is the access time, so it's a round trip time from CPU to ith level of memory. When we say round trip, it means that you make a request to the ith level of memory and you get back what is required. For example, if you want to read something, you send out the address, okay, and then you get the data back. So that's the round trip time. Okay, so that time. So let's just have somebody answer this, right? Okay. Hey, Chaitra. Chaitra, are you there? Shreyas? Okay. Shreyas, can you just briefly tell me what this expression depicts? Like, what do we infer from this? Correct. So, what does this expression say here? Ti minus 1 is less than Ti less than Ti plus 1. What does it mean? I mean, it's okay, you are not sure. I mean, that's the answer I typically get. But why don't we make sense out of it? No. So we have Ti. Okay. So this Ti, we are saying it is greater than Ti minus 1, but it is smaller than Ti plus 1. So we know that Ti is the access time to the ith level of memory. What could this mean now? Yeah, how different are they? Yeah, increasing order. What does it mean then? Yash is saying I minus 1 level is accessed prior to I level. Not quite. I mean, actually, it's true, but then that's not what it says here. Okay, Shreyas, meanwhile, you point to someone else. Let's find out from someone else. Call out someone. Rahul who? Rahul Raj, please unmute. Rahul, please unmute. So while he's unmuting, let me explain this. No, so if Ti is the time for my CPU to access ith level of memory, then when the CPU accesses the I minus 1th level, that time is going to be shorter. And if my CPU is going to access I plus 1th level, that's going to be bigger than Ti. Okay. See, that's don't get intimidated by these expressions. That's the idea of me asking you questions. Okay. So what we are trying to say is, let us say here there is one level, here is one level, and here is one level, and this is your CPU. When CPU is accessing this is, let us say this is T1, and then this is T2, and then this is T3. Okay. The closer it is to CPU, the shorter the time is. That's what it says. Okay. If there is Ti is the access time, if this is Ti, then Ti minus 1 is going to be smaller than Ti, and Ti plus 1 is going to be bigger than Ti. Okay, so that's all it says. Okay, so don't get intimidated by these expressions, and half of your textbook is like this. The moment you actually randomly open one page, you will get intimidated by these expressions or these figures. But it's very simple. Okay, if you just have to put your brain to work, that's all. Okay. Okay, Rahul, you're ready, so you have to explain the next one. Memory size. Now explain this. Can you please unmute? Why are you guys not able to unmute? Rahul Sahu. Yeah, explain. Memory size, SI. Explain this expression. Every level above the other level, okay, is larger in terms of memory size. Okay, very good. Thank you, thank you. Point to someone else. Call out a name. So what Rahul is saying is, so if again, if Si is the size of my memory at ith level, my Si minus one level memory is going to be smaller, and Si plus one level memory is going to be larger in terms of size, in terms of bytes or gigabytes or whatever, right? Okay. Yes, Rahul. Another. We need a name. We need a forced volunteer. Sugyan. Cost per byte. Can you explain this expression? Right. So the closer it is to the processor, what how is the cost? Higher the cost. Yeah, very good, very good. Okay. So what are we doing here? This multiplication. What is this? What is CI and what is this multiplication? Ah, the correct total cost of the memory. Okay, very good. Okay, so now this I think you guys can easily figure out. If you're looking for a laptop, right, with same configuration but they just differ with their RAM size, they would actually, I mean, if you have like a 4 GB RAM laptop and with the same configuration, but another laptop with 8 GB RAM, right? Everything else is same, but only the RAM size is different. 4 GB versus 8 GB will make a huge difference. If you note, I mean, if you have not noticed it yet, you should go and look at Amazon or Flipkart or wherever, right? So you just look at laptop prices, and just based on RAM size, there'll be like significant price difference. Okay, thanks, Sugyan. Yeah, let's point to someone else. Please do the favor. Who? Shruti? Shruti Singh. 144. Both are Shruti Singh. Okay, okay. Hey, Shruti. Uh, yeah, can you explain this part? Transfer bandwidth. What does this mean? Right. Okay. So this is similar to your access time only. Okay. So you can transfer, the bit rate will be faster when you have, when you're closer to CPU. And what about XI? Unit of transfer. Okay. So unit of transfer refers to how much bits you are transferring. If it's at the register level, you are transferring only bytes, right? Bytes or words or half words in that grain size. But if you're talking about cache, it's going to be in blocks. If it's memory, it is going to be pages. So that's the unit of transfer. Okay. All right. Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks, all of you. All right. So here are some properties. There's something called inclusion property. It means that a memory at the I minus one level, right, is a subset of ith level. So which means if I have a higher memory and I have a lower memory, my lower memory, lower means closer to CPU, uh, is a subset of the higher memory. Like for example, if uh, if I have a RAM, whatever data is in the RAM, right, must be there in your disk also. Okay, it's a subset of that. Okay, so it makes sense. Why? Because everything starts from your storage, or the highest level of, I mean, yeah, the highest level of memory, correct? Everything should be there in your storage disk or your SSD. And from there, when your computer boots, right, so whatever your data you're working on has to be brought from your secondary storage to primary memory to cache, cache to registers. So whatever is in register is brought from your primary memory only, correct? And you also always have to make sure that you copy things back to the higher level of memory, so that this property is uh, hold is held. Sorry. Next is coherence property. Coherence property is very, very important, especially when you have multiple processors, or when you have superscalar, or when you have more than one processing element working on common data, shared data. Okay, so what could happen is there is only like a common cache. Okay, and then you have your P1 here, P2 here. Okay, now this guy will be reading something, and this guy could be writing something here. Okay, now there'll be some race condition or something. Okay, so there are so many other inconsistencies that are possible here. So you always have to make sure that there is consistency here. So that's your coherence. Okay, so the other aspect is, so now let us say you have multiple levels of caches. Okay, so this is L2 cache, and let us say there is L1 cache here, but you have two L1 caches, one for your P1 and one for your P2. Now you're actually referring to one particular block here. Okay, and the same copy is held here. Okay, so it is read here, it is read here. Both of them have a local copy. But if P1 writes something to this, then P2's corresponding block should be invalidated. Okay, so let us say I have a variable a, and I make a local copy a here, local copy a here, but my P1 is updating a. Okay, initially a was 0 or something. Okay, both will have a equals to 0, a equals to 0, but now P1 is making a equals to 1. Okay, so my a new value is 1. Now P2, when it reads a, it should not read 0, correct? It should read 1. So the moment somebody writes something to the shared variable, then they have to invalidate all other copies, not only P2, if P3, P4, P5, so many other processors are also having a copy of A, everything should be invalidated. Okay, so this is very, very important. Otherwise, you will actually have like total chaos. Okay, so this is a very important concept. You have to maintain coherence. And next is locality of reference. Okay, temporal locality. Temporal locality means the recently referenced memory item, right, is more likely to be referenced again. Okay, so can somebody give an example of this? Suraj, you want to try? Suraj Kishore. When will this happen? A temporal locality of reference. Temporal means time. Okay, it says that if I access some item, yeah, yeah, you want to say something? Yeah, go ahead, go ahead. Yeah, can you give a programming example? Like in your program, when will you have temporal locality? If you're writing a program, right? Okay. So what is temporal about it? Like why will you access again and again? Okay. All right. Got it. Got it. Yeah. Hmm. Right. So you're right. Okay. So if you have like a subroutine or a function, and if you have that in a loop, or you have at multiple places you are accessing the same function, you're calling the same function, then there is a high chance that all these data associated with that function should also be called. Okay. So that's when you actually have a temporal reference. So which means that if I if I access something in my program very frequently, let us say I have a variable a, or I think most commonly used will be variable I, right, in a loop. So if you have variable I, if you have a loop and you have a variable I is the iterator, correct? So you will be using lot of references to these I. Okay, so a of I, b of I plus 1, all these things you will do I equals to I plus 1, whatever, right? So you'll be referring this. The moment you bring I into your memory, you will, there is most likely you will actually keep accessing I again and again. So that is your temporal reference. Okay. Sri Kantam Venkata Shesha. Uh, what's your full name? Hey, Sri Kanta. Uh, Now next we have spatial locality. Can you tell me what spatial locality is? Example in your program. Very good. Super. Super, super, super. Yeah, thank you. Arrays, tables, matrices, all these things, right? It means spatial locality means if I access A of I, it is highly likely I might access A of I plus 1 or I minus 1, right? Anything around A of I, right? I minus 1 or I plus 1, I'll be accessing the neighbors of I. So that's your spatial locality. Next, we have sequential locality of reference. This is your normal execution, right? If you take a program counter, PC equals PC plus 4, right? Except when you have branches. If you don't have branches, which most likely you will not, right? Most part of the program, you will not, it will not be a branch instruction. Okay. Probably branch will be like 10 or 15% of your program. The remaining 90 or 85% of your program is sequential. Okay, PC equals to PC plus 4. So that's your sequential. Okay, it's like in order execution. And then you have memory design implications. So this means that how you design your memory, okay, based on all these locality of reference, taking into consideration these locality of reference, how you design your memory. Okay, all right. Now we briefly saw about inclusion property, right? Like mi minus 1 being subset of mi. So here's the illustration for that. If you take a register here, so this is cache, okay? Sorry, not the register. If you take a cache here, your cache will hold some blocks of memory. And this block of memory will be actually brought from your main memory. So initially what happens is your CPU want to access some address, okay? And that address by default, when you just boot your system fresh, you will not have that in cache. You will have a cache miss. And then what you'll do, you will have to find it from your main memory, and then you will go to your secondary memory, okay, or you will go to even your another magnetic tape or somewhere, okay. So then you will bring it back. So you bring back the same data here, data here, data here. So what happens is essentially all the higher up memory will be there, okay. So in your, so whatever is there in this will be a subset of your higher up memory, okay. So that is what this image, this picture says, okay. Next we have working sets. So working sets are nothing but it's you just cluster the different memory access patterns. So there are let us say there are a b c, there are three programs that are running. They will have memory access patterns, correct. Now if you just take like one window of time, if you just take your t1 t2 and you have like a delta t here, and you will just have these profiles here, right. So this is the current working set of your memory, okay. So this is what you are interested in right now. Even though you may have like 100 different variables or 100 different matrices or data that your program uses, at any given window of time you will only use a subset of it, and that subset is called as a working set, okay. All right, so this is the most important slide. So this is we come to hit ratios in your memory. Okay, when you say hit ratio, it means what is the probability that when I request an element or data from my memory at mi, right? So the ith level of memory, what is the probability that I will find it? I'm requesting some data, okay, at address hex 8004 or something. Okay, now if I go to my memory and see 8004, what is the probability that I find the data I need? And that is hit ratio. Okay, and obviously 1 minus hit ratio is your miss ratio. Okay, so this is your miss ratio, and hi is your hit ratio or hit frequency. It's just a probability. Okay, next you have access frequency to ith level of memory. Now this is very interesting. Okay, let us say you have multiple levels, right? So you have your cache, and then you have your maybe you have your L1 cache, you have L2 cache, and then you have main memory. Okay, so here when you access it, let us say there is a miss here, there is a miss here, and there is a hit here. Okay, here you have everything in memory, but in two caches you have miss. Then what is the access frequency? Access frequency is nothing but 1 minus h1. Okay, you find it at the ith level. Okay, all the previous levels, all the previous I minus 1 level, you will have a miss. Okay, you just have to multiply everything. Okay, 1 minus h1 into 1 minus h2 into so on up to 1 minus h I minus 1, but here you have hit. Okay, so that is your access frequency. So how frequently you access main memory? Why you have it, you call it access frequency? It's because if you have hit here itself, right, you will just end using cache itself, you will not access the next level of memory, correct? So if you have to access next level of memory, there has to be a miss in the previous level. Okay, otherwise I will not access this. So this gives the access frequency to the ith level of memory. And if you want to find out effective access time, it's nothing but summation of product of fi and ti. Okay, so it's just multiply it with the time taken, the time it takes to access the ith level of memory. If I have to again, if I have multiple levels, correct, if I have to access, if I have to find access time for this, the effective access time is, I will first go check the first level of memory, there will be a miss. Second level of memory, there will be a miss. Third level of memory, there will be a hit. Okay, so then I have to multiply all these things, that what's the ratio, that there is a, what is the probability that there is a miss here, and there is a miss here, and there is a hit here. That probability multiplied by the time to access this memory will give me the effective access time of this memory. Okay, and the cost associated is this. Okay, summation of ci and si. Okay, si is nothing but size, depending on your size of your memory. Ci and si, that's what I think Suhas or someone told, right? So that's the cost. Okay, so now your actual this becomes an optimization problem. Okay, you want to minimize the effective access time, you want to reduce this as much as possible, subject to your size and your time. Okay, so that's all your memory problem is. Okay, you can have whatever number of memory levels you want, so many things you can have, but ultimately what you need is effective access time should be minimum, subject to these constraints. Okay, so my, and then my cost also. Okay, my cost should not go up, my size should be greater than 0, ti should be greater than 0. Okay, so this is the total constraints I have to have minimum effective access time. Okay, all right, now based on this, let us just solve a quick problem. So get your pen and paper with you, and then also calculator. So consider this three level memory hierarchy. So these are the givens. Okay, so you have access times for your cache, main memory, and disk array. Okay, now the goal is to have your effective access time t equals to 850 nanoseconds. Okay, your cache hit ratio h1 is given 0.98, and memory hit ratio h2 is given 0.99. Okay, so typically it's actually very high like this, it's highly likely. So that's the beauty of having multiple levels. Okay, and total cost upper bound is $1,500. Okay, our job is to find s3 and your t2 and s3. Okay, so we have this equation for total cost. That's the minimization problem we have, right? Total cost C1 S1 C2 S2 C3 S3 is less than 1500, and we have T, the effective access time, as this, right? H1 plus H1 T1. This is a summation of your HI TI, right? And, or sorry, HITI, but you also have FITI, sorry, FITI, and that should be less than 850. Okay. So now let's try to find this out. What is C? Sorry, not what is C. What is S3? We need to find out what S3 is. So this is unknown. Okay. C1 is given here. C2 is here. Again S1, S2. C1, C2, C3 is known. S1, S2 is known. Aliva, what is the answer? Oh, okay. S3. Ah, Sandeep has already told. Right. 39.8. Okay, great. All right. Very close. And okay, C is 39.8, or it is close to 40 GB. Okay. What is T? T is 903. Yeah. No, actually, can you please rework? Aliva, are you there? Have you already left? You're there. You already gave attendance. I'm just checking. No, that's okay. That's fine. You're working on this? T? Okay. So this is the equation. So what did you guys get? You solve this? If you solve this, you should get 1250 nanoseconds. Okay, so that's your T2. All right, fine. So anyway, you practice this. Okay, you work it out. So these are some of the problems that you might get in your exam. Okay, so please work on this. So I think with this we are done for the day. Okay, so we'll see you in the next class then. You can give your attendance and leave. Right? Thank you, guys.